today aims to change lives through the love of reading. And in our special edition of the Writer's Corner live show, we're going to be talking to Gasant Abarder about his book, Hack with the Grenade. It's a collection of editors' backstories of South African news and an interview you certainly don't want to miss, because we're going to be covering, or he covers topics such as race, identity, crime, apartheid, misogyny in business and sport, and also spatial planning and more in his book. So don't go away. We will be right back. If you're just joining us, then welcome to the Writer's Corner live show. I'm your host, Bridgetti Limbanda in Cape Town in South Africa. And the stream is made possible by StreamYard, Creative Edge, and BeLive Media. A special warm welcome if you're joining us on Amazon Live, so that you can know more about the books that we're offering, and also the author and their backstories. If you're watching us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, also a very, very warm welcome to you. And just know that we are monitoring the comments, so feel free to say hello. If you have any questions for our author, please post that as well. We are monitoring our comments and will respond. In today's show, we're talking to Gasant Abarder about his book, Hack with the Grenade, and editor's backstories of South African news. But first, I want to say a warm welcome to my friend and co-host, Mary Elizabeth Jackson. She is a special needs and disabilities advocate and also the award-winning author of the Poolicious children's book series. She writes stories and books for children that has special messages for them that empowers them, and she also writes motivational books for adults. Mary's in Nashville in the USA, and I'm in Cape Town, so let us know where in the world you're joining us from. We'd love to know. And so with that, a warm welcome to my friend and co-host, Mary Elizabeth Jackson. Mary, welcome to the show.
Hi. I am very excited to be here. How are you today?
I'm very well, can't complain, and I'm very, very excited about our guest today. We haven't had many authors from South Africa. I could probably
just kind of a
count them
sprinkle.
on one hand.
Yeah, just like a little sprinkle of them, and we need to feature more authors. We've had authors from South Africa and Ireland and England, and I don't think we have fans who watch in Australia, but I don't think we've had any authors from Australia. So we would love for people around the globe to reach out to us. We'd love to have you on the show, and we're certainly excited to have him on our show today. And it's so cool to meet someone who is behind the scenes and then writes about it and then is on the other side of things. And so I always think that's so fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know Gasant Abarder, he is a journalist who worked in print, radio, and television newsrooms in South Africa for a whopping 21 years.
He doesn't look old enough.
No, he doesn't. He was the editor for the well-known Cape Times and Cape Argus, and he was also nominated as the Maiden Guardian's 200 Young South Africans in 2013. Gasant also served as the deputy chairperson of the South African National Editors Forum, and currently he is the media and marketing communications manager for the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. But I'm dying to talk to him. Yes. Shall we invite him to the show?
Yes, let's do, please.
Gasant,
Hi.
welcome to the show. So great to have you join us today.
Hi,
Thanks so
nice to
much.
see you.
Thanks
Yes.
so much, Mary and Brigitte. I'm actually pinching myself here because this is such an amazing platform to be featured on, and to be speaking to such a privilege to be hosted by the two of you. I don't know. Is it good evening there, Mary, in the States? Home of the
No.
smash burger, isn't it? In
Yeah,
Tennessee.
actually, we are Smashville. Nashville is called Smashville. Yes, you're right. And it is one of the top places in the country for like bridal parties and weddings and music. And it's actually 10:37 in the morning here. So
Oh, okay.
you are 7 hours ahead of me. So I always say that I get to talk to people in the future. That's what I always say, because y'all are in the future. So you know what happens before I do, right?
You can start running when you see trouble on our side.
Yeah, if y'all are running, you call me 911, get out, I'm leaving. So, oh my gosh,
Oh
we're
my,
so glad to have you here.
Brigitte, we in the
absolutely.
same time zone. We live quite close to each other, which is quite weird. But yeah, it's really an honor to be. I love the imaging of your show, by the way. It's
Thank
Thank
you.
fantastic.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
She does a fantastic job. She's like, I just call her the live stream guru. That's another name I'm going to give her. Yes, she's amazing, and we really enjoy the show. We've been doing it almost 3 years, and we just love it. Absolutely love it.
I know. I still have to pinch myself when I think, how we started the show, literally on a whim. We had like one conversation, let's do it, and then we was like, okay, should we start next week?
Yes.
And here we are, 3 weeks, 3 years, almost 3 years later.
Wow,
Crazy.
fantastic.
Yeah,
It's
and yeah,
amazing.
we're almost booked out till the end of the year. So
I
we
saw
are
that.
yes, we're
I'm
excited
very
about
lucky.
that.
That's what I'm saying. I'm really lucky and feel very privileged to be here. I come from a part of the world in Cape Town, South Africa, where people were dispossessed of their homes. So my
Mm,
grandfather was kicked out of his house because I'm a person of color, and he couldn't live in a certain area, so we had to move to an area called the Cape Flats, which has a lot of social problems. And in my storytelling, it gave me in the newspaper world, it gave me a very rich understanding of what ordinary South Africans go through. The politics that we often hear about in the news are the identity politics. You hear about old Julius Malema, the rabble rouser, our president Cyril Ramaphosa, but on the ground, the issues, the bread and butter issues, are what journalists should be concerned about. So this book behind me, Hack with a Grenade, is a series of backstories I did while I was editor of the Cape Argus. And as you mentioned in your introduction, it's tackling a whole lot of complex social issues, but using real people that I met on my journey, writing a column called the Friday Files about interesting South Africans doing incredible things. And I use them to tell the stories, the story of South Africa, really. The psyche behind what makes South Africa tick. A very complex country, lots of inequality. And obviously, the book has a big Cape Town bias because that's where I live, but it focuses on national issues as well.
Hmm.
yeah, because
That
they're
is that is
everywhere, aren't they? They're all these issues are everywhere.
Yeah, sure. But, in South Africa, um, I quoted George Orwell earlier in the week. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, from
Mm,
Animal Farm. And the thing is, we do have some of the biggest inequality ratios between rich and poor in a country. And it's a big worry because it's even seen with our vaccine rollout at the moment,
mm,
that we call it the apartheid vaccine, or a vaccine apartheid, because there are just so many different issues. People aren't plugged into the economy. We've got issues with broadband and access to Wi-Fi. But this story is not. It's not really. This book's not really about that. This book's a celebration of life in South Africa, but it tries to make non-South Africans or those living abroad, expats, understand what is currently going on in our country. The issues we deal with in newsrooms that we think people know about, but they actually don't, you know?
And I know that that's highlighted. I think it's in chapter 2 of your book, isn't it? When you've actually you tell the audience what you did in your newsroom to make a point, for want of a better description, because that's what your book is about. It's about stories of real people, and it's a great way of storytelling because your stories are relatable to the man on the street. It's stuff we are intimately familiar about, so if we read it, you can relate to it, and that's what I love about it. So for those who hasn't read the book yet, can you just give us a brief synopsis of chapter 2
Okay.
and why that's so close to your heart?
So chapter 2, if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't read the book myself in a while. I had a lot of reading to do before it was published, but I think it's the one about Danny and the invisible people, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Correct.
So this was a collaboration, the Cape Argus, the big regional newspaper that I edited in 2016. We did a collaboration with homeless people. And, what happened was the guy in chapter 3 actually introduced me to the guy in chapter 2, if that makes any sense at all. But anyway, so I was invited to speak to a group of homeless people in the Cape Town Central Business District about my job as a newspaper editor. I spoke to them for all of 2 minutes, and then I stopped talking because the stories I heard from these homeless people, how they ended up on the streets, qualified doctors, people with degrees, a mom raising her child on the streets of Cape Town. And I actually remember almost running back to the office, which wasn't too far away. I couldn't wait to tell my news team about it. And everybody was kind of like at our news conference, they were like rolling their eyes, like what stories are we going to tell about homeless people? How are we going to make this a newspaper series? And I said, it's very simple. We tell the stories about the people that we ignore every day, the people that knock on our car windows. We don't acknowledge them. We don't look at them. And then we came up with a very powerful project called the Dignity Project. And the Dignity Project profiled, it's like, I think there was a series called the People of New York, or the Humans of New York.
The Humans of New York, yeah.
Humans of New York, yeah. And in a very similar way, every day for 14 days, we profiled a homeless person in Cape Town. But it was called the Dignity Project for a reason, because I didn't want pictures of homeless people sleeping rough and scratching in bins. So the brief to the photographer who worked on the series was, I want you to take this image of this homeless person at their best. So imagine you shooting the mayor of Cape Town or the president of South Africa. That's what I want. And a journalist called Lance Witten, who's a fantastic storyteller, was perfect for the job because he does multimedia as well. So after 3 weeks, I was begging these guys, show me what you've got. I've given you 3 weeks, which is a luxury in any daily newsroom. So they showed me what they had, and I thought it was a really good series, but it missed something. And then I remember Lance telling me he had met a guy who writes, and he sent a few pieces into the newspaper. And then I actually had a look at the paper. And yes, it needed some work, but this guy could write, He had a story to tell, and here was a lived experience from the horse's mouth, His name was Danny Oosthuizen, and I invited him in that Sunday before we launched, and I told him, you're going to write our front page lead tomorrow. So I think for the first time in publishing history in probably the world, a homeless man wrote the front page lead of a major mainstream newspaper. So it was unprecedented. It got a lot of coverage in the media. heart started to soften because we gave him a weekly column and we paid him for it. He was able to improve his life circumstances. But we learned so much more from Danny about our humanity as well. So you asked me about the experiment. So I had an ulterior motive. How can I send a team of journalists out and they have prejudices about homeless people? Danny happened to be HIV positive as well, and he was gay. So, I mean, think about it. I wanted him to sit next to one of my journalists. I wanted them to feel uncomfortable and to get to know him and I invited him into the news conferences because he had a very unique worldview that we take for granted. How do you take a shower when you live on the streets? When a woman is having a period, the public toilets in Cape Town are locked, and the city of Cape Town has actually declared war on homeless people, and a lot of cities all over the world has done this. The city started issuing fines for loitering if you're homeless. Can you imagine? So if you don't have a fixed abode, you can't get bail, and we're criminalizing poverty. That's all we're doing. So that chapter deals with that, but I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to spoil it for the reader. But I had 200 profiles of this Friday File columns to curate as my raw material, and I had to choose 10 stories to tell a coherent kind of book, to put together in a coherent book. Because my idea was to take it to the publisher and say, "Here, publish this." Obviously, they laughed at me and says it doesn't work like that. We need a narrative. We need to hear your voice, and you need to sew this all together in one book,
Right. Right. So that's the question we have is, who did you write this book for? Because on its first appearance, people might think that it's just for a journalist, or, if you're going to be a journalism major, it might be a good book to study things like that. So, tell us who this is for. I mean, listening to you, it's for everyone. That's what I hear. But was that your intention in the beginning? And what's your intention now with it? Is it changed?
Yeah. So one of my pet hates as a journalist was that as journalists we tend to write for each other instead of our audiences. So this was never intended to be a book for journalists. Although if you read the introduction, it does paint the media landscape in South Africa and globally as well. So from that perspective, it's very useful. But what I wanted to illustrate for journalists was there is a life for newspapers after all. If you look at the New York Times, the London Evening Standard, they've all managed to increase their subscription bases through innovative journalism, but also investment in journalism. So the book has messages for owners of media houses, for journalists as well, but primarily it's for the South African public to get behind the scenes of newsrooms, talk about some of the challenges we face, and also to give them a sense of what are the issues that we're not talking about through the eyes of a newspaper editor. And often, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the kind of mantra that they put out in the news media. But we're ignoring the real bread and butter issues. And that was my point. So to make newspapers relevant again, we needed to tackle issues that affect real South Africans. Yes, there's a lot of crime. And people are beaten over the head with crime all the time. But what is the story behind the crime? Who is the criminal? And why is he or she doing what they're doing? And that's why we started the kind of phrase in our newsroom, in your own voice. And another chapter in the book deals with that when you'll remember in 2015, there were massive protests in South Africa by South African students at universities. It was calling for free tuition. Fees must fall. That was the hashtag of the campaign. So the criticism from the students were that they weren't getting their voices heard in the mainstream media. It was kind of top heavy. We were speaking to the vice chancellors of universities and the minister and all the academics, but we weren't hearing from the students. So somebody put out a challenge on Twitter, and without thinking, I accepted the challenge. And the challenge was, it's a guy called Gasant. He's Twitter royalty in South Africa. And he said, I dare or I challenge any editor to hand over an edition of the newspaper to the students involved in the protest. And I accepted the challenge, not thinking. And then obviously there was the real chance that I was going to get fired the next day, because I went on Twitter and I publicly proclaimed that we're handing over an edition to students. But it wasn't as easy as it sounded, and it was quite a challenge, but it worked out to be a bit of an award-winning edition. It was recognized by the International News and Media Association in the Enterprise Journalism category of 2017. So it was breaking new ground. Again, I gave over the trust of an entire newspaper to a bunch of students who I didn't know, and they rose to the occasion. So and that's how we're going to change newspapers. The relevance. That's what makes the New York Times a fantastic read, because people they're investing in storytelling, and that's what we need to get back to.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry about my kids. I'm sorry about my kids
no.
in the background, if you can
This
hear
is
them, but
live.
they're very difficult to handle.
It's
This
okay.
is live and this is real. So we've got a question here in the audience from Patty Mason. She says, what are two of your most passionate issues?
Okay. So I see a lot of people publishing these days. And when I say that, I mean ordinary folks like my mom and dad. They see things on WhatsApp and they forward it without testing whether the information is correct and whether it's fake news or not. Or my mom will see something on Facebook and she'll treat it as a gospel. Like my dad will say, oh, I just read here that people who smoke have more chance of getting COVID. And there's nothing to prove that, And so I started a platform called Loud House Media, and it's there to teach citizen journalists the basic fundamentals of journalism, of content creation, from shooting your own videos, but also the ethics behind it, how not to get sued or get yourself fired, or even get arrested. We've had cases in South Africa where people participated in hate speech and used very derogatory terms to describe black people and got arrested and tried in court. So that's what I'm passionate about, about teaching people. But I'm also, because of my new role at the university, I'm very passionate about using my skills that I've learned in newsrooms and turning them into kind of below the line, real newsworthy items about a university to a mainstream audience, and using the full 360 degrees of TV, video, audio, print, online, digital, social media, all the tools to tell a story about an amazing university that I work for, In fact, I'm wearing the blazer, by the way. I'm like,
I see.
Showing off University of the Western Cape, yeah.
I see, wearing that proud. Gasant, just before we end off, do you have, you've done an amazing job of Hack with a Grenade. Could you share one or two tips or strategies for our aspiring authors when it comes to crafting a compelling story?
Yeah. So this book started 10 years ago, actually. I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that Piers Morgan inspired me to write this book. About 10 years ago, he wrote a book called The Insider. He wrote a book called The Insider, and it was all about his time at the Daily Mirror when he was doing some amazing advocacy journalism. He was against the war in Iraq, and he kept a very meticulous diary, but I didn't do the same thing over my years as an editor. I was part of the first team in South Africa that started a tabloid, or as what's known as a red top newspaper, a naughty newspaper with scandal and Page 3 girl and What You Have was all about it. So the story started. The manuscript was called Tabloid Junkie, and it was going to be the introduction of tabloid newspapers to South Africa. But then, as I grew up and I have kids now, and as I graduated to the more formal, unpopular newspapers, if I can call it that.
Mm-hmm.
The story changed, and I actually lost the manuscript because my MacBook bombed, and I was able to retrieve it, and that then said to me, I need to start writing the story now. So my advice to everybody who's got a story to tell, an aspiring author, don't delay. Don't say one day I'm going to write the story. Say today's day one. I'm going to mind map all the chapters and I'm going to put it together. I also one of the very useful things for me was carrying my phone with me and using my voice recorder, because suddenly a turn of phrase will occur to me. And when you get back home, it won't sound the same when you're trying to type it and remember it in your head. So I'm recording voice notes with myself all the time. And because I write a weekly column, I also do this. So people see me in traffic talking to my phone. I suppose it's not that strange anymore because the Kardashians do it all the time, But I'm busy recording voice notes and turns of phrases and ideas. And it's a very, very useful tool because the best way of writing is the spoken word. We need to write the way we speak because we're relating stories. And my passion really is storytelling, whether you do it on video or on social media or in a book or in a newspaper, and the best way to tell a story is to think about your mom and how are you going to relate something that happened today. You're going to speak the way you speak, not write a passive sentence, So use your voice recorder on your phone. That's my big tip I want to leave you with
I absolutely
on today's
agree.
show.
Yes, that's exactly what I do too, because like you said, it never comes back the same way. Even if it's 3:00 in the morning and you need to go back to sleep, you got to write it down or voice record it because it never sounds the same. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but at 3:00 in the morning, my wife's also complaining.
Sure.
She's snoring. So you have to live with that as well.
Well, we won't tell her you said that, but
absolutely not. Gasant, thank you so much. This was amazing, and I think we're going to have to invite you back again. I think we could probably go for an hour with you, just very, very easily. So we'll find a way somehow to get you back on the show. But I want to say a huge big thank you to everyone who's joined us on Amazon Live today. Thank you to Patty. We loved all your comments. On Facebook, thank you to everyone on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. It was great having you join us. So thanks everyone. Gasant, thank you so much. We look forward to having you back as a guest again.
It was a real pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.